G'day, I'm Mark Berg. Queensland is home to some of the best impoundment dam fishing in Australia. This week we meet up with a bloke that's happy to share his passion for sooty grunters, Simon Goldsmith.
What about your connections? Power to the field gate. I first discovered sooties when I was living in North Queensland. 2000 to 2001 I lived there, and I used to chase them in the creeks, sight casting to big black fish in shallow water, and that's when the addiction really kicked in. You know, a lot of people mightn't think sooties are the greatest fish in the world. Sure, they don't get as big as barra do, or a lot of the reef species do up north, but they are just so aggressive. So what they lack in size, they make up for in attitude. A bite from the sooty, it's anything but subtle. You know, 1 minute you're winding your crankbait nice and slowly, looking at the birds flying by, and next minute you're just getting slammed. And it's that pure aggression that I just absolutely love. Look at the size of it, it's as high as it is long. It's just so fat. No wonder when you slam lures like that. Alright, let's get you back. So sooties are a species that you'll find anywhere from probably about Mackay up to the tip of the Cape York, basically, and they'll occupy a lot of different places. As I mentioned before, I used to catch them in those sandy creeks that used to run through the cane fields around Hinchinbrook. Well, here in the Pioneer Valley, you're largely doing the same thing. You're fishing those skinny little shallow, sight casting to fish in water that's that deep. So they're very diverse. Rainforest, those cane field drains that I talked about. That's their natural habitat. They've also stocked it into a lot of dams. In the early days, we used to hear about the sooties that they used to get in Tinaroo when it was really starting to come along, and they were big specimens. Peter Faust, we got them in there as well as bycatch. But for me, if you're looking for an impoundment to catch sooties, there's only one place, and that's Youngler Dam. I travel to a lot of different fisheries and a lot of stocked impoundments, and for me, there is nowhere better than Youngler. It is truly a stunning fishery. They stock sooties in a lot of these barra dams up here, and we know with barra they're very much a warm season species. The sooties, however, they'll eat your lures all year round. They behave a little bit differently. In summer they'll scatter throughout the lake, and you can find them in those shallow areas. During the cooler months, I tend to find they generally sit on those deeper trees, so it makes them a little easier to target. They're also a species that you can catch all day long, and while you fish for them early in the morning and they'll generally scatter, once that sun gets high in the sky, they'll then retract back to the trees, and they'll look for that shade. In many ways, they're a little bit easier to find when that sun's high, because all you got to do is look for that shadow, look for those spots where they'll get out of the sun. You find those, throw your lures in, good chance you'll get a fish. Daddy. Come on. Gotcha. So you come to somewhere like Youngler and can be a little bit intimidating. You drive away from the boat ramp and you're hit by this curtain of flooded trees. And every tree looks like it will hold a fish, and most of them will at certain times. But there are some trees that are better than others. Sooties, like a lot of fish, they like a bit of cover. They like a roof over their head. So if you can find a big tree that has a lot of those, those horizontal branches, the sooties will sit under those. So the bigger and nastier the tree is, the better chance there is that there's a sooty at home. Sooties are a pretty tolerant species. They don't need certain water clarity. Well, I've never found that they've needed. Generally, the warmer the water, the better. When you're here in summer and that water temperature is getting high, 28 degrees, they get really angry. And when that temperature gets, cranking up like that, that's when I love to hit the shallows, because they get up in there in that warm water and they are super pissed off. You throw a lure in there, they're gonna slam it, and it's a ton of fun. You look for the best trees about what is going on under the water, but it's also important to look at what's going above the water. And the cormorants love to roost in the trees here, and they'll hang out in a big group. And when you find those cormorants in the trees, and of course they poo in the water, that's generally where you're going to find a pile of sooties. And when you find it like that, it's like shooting fish in a barrel. Well, it puts a lot of fish in the boat. For me, it's not too much of a challenge, because you find the birds, you find the fish. All you got to do is make the cast and hook up. I do a fair bit of fishing. A lot of it's at home, fishing in urban environments. The Gold Coast, for example, you feel like you're fishing in suburbia. When you come up here, in many ways I see it as soul fishing. It's not just about the fish, it's about the environment that you're in. It's about the kingfish you see in the tree come down and swoop something off a lily. The ospreys that we've seen, those huge nests that you have here. It's the sum of all those parts that make this place so great and makes sooty fishing what it is for me. Sooties are anything but a subtle fish. So when you make that cast and you get bit, I've had some people say, so what do I do when I get a bite? Well, you try and make sure the rod doesn't get pulled out of your hand. So when you get that bite and you feel that fish hooked, you want to get stuck in and you want to try and muscle it away from cover. Because if you don't, there's a good chance they're going to own you and you're going to lose that fish and you're going to lose a lure.
So what do you do?
Okay, so I'll make the cast and the lure will land beyond the tree. So I'll crank it past, and as you would expect, the bites generally come when that lure gets next to or just on the other side of the tree towards you. So when you get that bite and you get that hook up, you want to load your rod as quickly as you can, and it very much depends where you are in terms of the cover. I always generally like to go with a low load of the rod. I can find I can get more pressure doing it to the side than I can high sticking it. Try and put on as much pressure on that fish as you possibly can. Once you get it away from cover, you're generally fairly safe. Come here. God, he's got some strength to him. Once you get it back towards the boat and you start to see the fish, if you want, you can back your drag off a little bit, but you can take it fairly easily. If you get the fish away from the tree, generally you're going to get the fish in the net. You can use spin or bait caster gear. My preference is always bait caster because I'm a bait caster junkie. I find the bait casters, for the type of fishing I like to do, is the best tool for the job, because I always like to try and get my lures into the spots where most people can't get a lure. I like to think that I'm a reasonable caster, and I love the challenge of seeing that little slot open up between the trees, making the presentation, working it through and going, I'm going to get bit at any moment, and bang, it happens. To me, that's as rewarding as getting the fish in the boat, is seeing the challenge of having to make that cast and you get one shot. You make that shot and you get the fish. That really rings my bell. When it comes to lures, there's many choices. I've got a guy that I work with, Steve, and we talk about sooties a lot, and he was very much the guy who first put me on the sooties. And we always say, if somebody says to you, this is a good sooty lure, that's not necessarily a mark of it being a good lure. So I suppose the point I'm trying to make is these guys will pretty much eat anything. If they're there and you put a bait in front of them, they'll eat it. However, there are some lures that are better than others, and I'm a real crankbait junkie. So I like a crankbait that's going to be fairly loud, and I want a lure that is going to work every time I cast it. So what I mean by that is that when I make that cast, I want it to go straight. I don't want it to bend to the left, I don't want it to bend to the right. I want it to fly straight and true through the air, and likewise, when it lands in the water, I want that lure to come through that cover exactly as it's intended. Well, I love throwing crankbaits. It's not the only lure that you can use, and as we mentioned before, they'll eat pretty much anything. In a place like Youngalla, my staples are a crankbait, of course, and a spinnerbait. The spinnerbait, like the crankbait, is a lure that will throw and go straight and true, and you can work it through that cover. The key for this place is having a lure that isn't going to hang up in the trees, because if you hang up in the trees, you've then got to motor in and pull that out. And if you've got a hot spot, a hot tree, you don't want to burn those fish. You don't want to soil that water. So a spinnerbait and a crankbait are two great lures. So if you're going to throw a crankbait, you can use shallow ones that dive this deep, or you can tie on one that swims to 20 foot. And I'll use anything between those two parameters. My standard retrieve is very simple. Cast it to the structure, or in most cases throw it past the structure and just slow roll it back. When the water's really warm, I like to work the bait a little bit quicker because the fish are a little bit more worked up. So it's very much, it's not rocket science, this fishing. Make the cast and crank the lure back. Generally, if you get your lure tight enough to cover, they're gonna eat it. So, it's simple, but it's fun fishing. Yep, got one. Choke that down. Once you've caught them, of course, you need to look after your fish. I'm a big advocate of catch and release fishing. So to me, you don't just want to catch them once, you want to catch them multiple times. And to do that, you need to look after them. So I always fish with an Environet. Once the fish are in there, they're nice and safe. After that, you want to get the hooks out of their mouth, and that's not always an easy task. They don't have a big mouth like a barra, they've only got a little mouth. So especially when they really choke that lure down and all you've got is the bib sticking out, you want to be very careful about getting those hooks out. So a set of long nose pliers is the way to go. And And in most cases, if you can get down there, that lure will come out fairly easy. You don't want to keep them out of the water too long, as you don't want to do with any fish. So look after them, put them back in the water. They'll be here for next time. Thanks, mate. See you next time. Line-wise, I'd probably fish a little bit lighter than a lot of people do here. I'll fish anywhere between 10 and 15. I use 10 pound on my spin gear because in a lot of cases I'm throwing smaller lures and I want longer casts. But on my bait casters, it's 15 pound PE. The J braid for me is a great line. It's fairly thick for a 15 pound compared to some others. And the leader I then attach to it is anywhere between 12 and 20. If I'm fishing a deep bait, a lure that I'm going to let sink a long way down, I'll probably go up to 20 because I'm going to be slowly working that lure back over the tree. And if you get bit deep in that tree, you want that 20 pound rather than 12 to try and muscle that fish back out. Where's the fish? That's the one. As anglers, I think we have a huge responsibility to look after this resource. You know, this resource, and in this case, Youngler Dam, it means a lot to me. In many ways, I feel more at home here than I do anywhere else. So I feel a huge responsibility to make sure that, you know, when I come here, I touch this place as little as I can. Go out, catch a few fish, end up with a wealth of, you know, satisfaction that really gets you here. We stock these fisheries, you know, this place, and like a lot of the fisheries that we have in these dams, they don't exist because of the hard work of stocking groups and, you know, people like myself buying stocked impoundment permits. So, you know, we've got something very special here that we've created and that nature has given us. So we come, we enjoy, and we go home and we leave little marks. You know, when I pull out of here, once my boat's on the trailer, the only thing I leave behind is the tyre tracks and the dirt road when we go. You know, these places are too good to destroy, so, you know, we need to look after them. You know, it's a big journey for me to come all the way to Youngler from Brisbane, you know, door to door, from jumping in my car at home in Brizzy to getting out of the boat ramp here. It's 14 hours. That's a big commitment. And I suppose in a lot of ways, it's the commitment that you've got to go to and the 14 hours sitting there looking at that white line that helped make this place so special. If I had it an hour from home, like I've got with Maroon Dam, I'd probably fish it too much and I'd get sick of it. but you know, I'm here now. It's the first time I've been back in 4 years. And that drive to get here, the anticipation, you know, the night before, it's a bit like Christmas Day. You're thinking about, okay, what's going to be waiting for me when I get here in the morning? What are the baits that I'm going to tie on? You know, when you're thinking about that stuff, it sort of puts it into perspective about how special this place is. And for me, there's not too many more places more special. You know, I was really lucky. I had a good mate of mine, a guy who at the time was involved with the stocking group, exposed this place to me and just how sensational it is. And that was probably about 12 years ago now. Since then, I've introduced a few other good friends to this place. And just like me, they have fallen in love with it. So that's my plan for the future, is to expose this waterway to as many people as I can. My son has really got the fishing bug. As you would expect, it's in the genes. I got it from my mum and he got it from me. So I look forward to the day that I get to bring him up here. It'll be a special moment.
It's been a privilege to learn so much about the art of sooty fishing from such a passionate bloke and in such a picturesque location. So much so, I thought I'd have a quick crack at it myself.
Nice fish. Oh yeah, net. Cool. That's cool. Oh, a little snag right in close.